All right, stop what you're doing. It's time for another edition of the Planning Pulse podcast. As always, Matt Harvison here with my good friend Beau Mellin. Beau, how you doing today?
Good, Matt. Good. Fired up, baby.
I love it. I love it. We're always fired up every time we get a chance to get together on a call. It's not very often Beau and I get to meet, but when we do, we sure get fired up about it. But
Yep.
today we are going to be talking about a completely administrative privilege. The use of model management is something that is critical to all of our customers, that there's an administrator on board or in-house that's going to be able to run and own your instance of Workday Adaptive Planning. Now, you don't have to be an expert in anything Workday Adaptive Planning to be the one to own your instance, but it is an administrative privilege, and we want to make sure that we treat that with respect. So we're going to be talking today a little bit about how to go through model management, what exists in model management, how to move around, how to add things like dimensions, make changes to your levels. We're going to be diving into all of those things today. But as we always say with Workday Adaptive Planning, it is a completely self-service tool. It's one of those really unique things about Workday Adaptive Planning in the EPM space. When you think about other tools that may be out there, you have to hire administrators to come on board. You have to hire experts with people with years and years of implementation experience to be able to do simple tweaks and edits to formulas and to models. Inside of Adaptive, none of that is the case. You are on your own. You have a completely self-service tool that you're going to be able to grow and scale and change over time. Without further ado, I know Beau's going to be walking us through model management today. So, Beau, let's get fired up and let's get after it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Okay. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll dive in. So, like Matt talked about, right? And this is if you're listening at home and you're going to be the owner of your adaptive instance, this is a screen that you're going to get really familiar with. You're going to be in the model management backend a lot inside of your adaptive instance. When you log in, you're in this screen here. Open up our navigation pane. We go over to modeling, model management. So this is where you're going to be spending a lot of your time. And as a power user, you're going to really get to understand the ins and outs of what all these mean. So everything in blue, right, that we have highlighted here is a hyperlink into the back end of where a lot of your work will be taking place. Matt kind of alluded to it a little bit early on in the fact that Adaptive is a self-service tool. Everything in here that we're going to take a look at today is click. It's not code. It's drag and drop. It's no scripting. Matt and I have zero computer science background, and we're able to, leverage every single aspect inside of Adaptive. So we're going to be kind of walking through some of these here in the model management backend today. And we already had an episode on getting ready for budget season, and a big part of that being setting up your versions inside of Adaptive, your different forecasts and your iterations of your plan. So when we kind of start inside of our adaptive instance, one of those key pieces is your versioning. So we're going to jump right into that. So when we go into modeling, model management, now we can go in and click on our versions. When I go in and I open this screen here, you're going to see a lot of different options for us. One of the reasons you can see a lot of different options is inside of Adaptive, you can have as many versions as you want. You're never going to hit a gigabyte limitation as far as setting up different aspects of your plan, whether that's a rolling forecast or a top-down or a bottoms-up budget, or if you have different iterations of your actuals where you're doing some different configuration there. It's really easy to spin up a new iteration. And as you see, when I zoom in here, we can go ahead and set an original budget for the year, lock that down, archive it, the data cannot be impacted, and then we can make a new copy of it. And it's pretty easy to make a new copy of a version as well, right? Maybe I'm sitting in my working budget. I want to say, working budget, best case spin-off. And then I come on down, I just create a copy of my working budget, copies all my data, my formulas, my notes, all the data sitting in there. And then we can go ahead and make a copy of that. And then when that version gets created, we can go into our assumptions, make some new best case, worst case baseline assumptions, and then go compare them against each other. So the version modeling in the back end is already right there. Great feature.
Yeah. And I would say also, I know that we had a previous episode of the podcast that was centered around, okay, it's budget season. Now what? Versions is where you're going to start there, right? That's your monthly, your quarterly forecast, but it's also the beginning of your annual operating plan. I know we're going to dive into additional detail in a later date about all of those buttons there on the version creation because they all are all really important. But when you think of an action that you're trying to take, am I spinning up a scenario just like Beau did the best case spinoff? versions is where you're going to start.
100%. 100%. So next piece here, your time. Time is going to go ahead and be where we set up those calendars. We can set up as many as you want, right? Default calendars, your alternate calendars. Am I sitting in a weekly time granularity, a monthly? Do I need to have a 445, a 544, right? We can spin those up for you. So levels, another key piece, right? That was our first episode we ever did. So open up a new tab, jump on into my levels. It's going to be that organizational hierarchy. Another thing here today, super easy to configure, right? What we talk about with a lot of our customers when we hit on levels, we work with a lot of high growth scaling companies. Maybe you're involved in a lot of M&A, or you guys are in a hyper growth stage of your organization. And you know, inside of your United States today, these are all your locations or departments or cost centers, whatever it may be. But we just acquired somebody and we have a new piece of our org structure that should roll up to levels sitting inside the United States. I can go ahead and click on that, come up to the top and say, new acquired group, new acquired group. We want that to roll on up to the United States. I go ahead and click save. And when I go ahead and so levels, next dimensions, another really key piece, right? We hit on this in our last episode. This is where we're going to go ahead and let me go ahead and discard that change really quickly for my level structure there, just to go ahead and clean that up. So dimensions, when I go ahead and we talk through dimensions, this is all your additional layers of detail. Really easy to understand and maintain. We can work on these directly inside of our instance. We can go ahead and import new dimensions in through our manual import template, or we have the ability and the option to go ahead and integrate them in as well. Maybe we're sitting and working in our asset class, and we need to go ahead and create a new dimension value. We can come on in here, create that new dimension value. Now I can go forecast that asset class 1, 2, 3. A couple other ones we want to hit on today. So we hit on versions, time, levels, dimensions. Can't do any finance work or really any planning work without making sure we have our general ledger and our chart of accounts intact, right? So this is coming on over to our general ledger accounts where we can facilitate the hierarchical structure of our balance sheet and of our P&L. This is where we can go ahead and maintain this, just as I showed on the level structure and on the dimension structure. A nice feature of the overall entire modeling kind of engine of Adaptive is once you kind of understand and know how to add something in one area of modeling, the process is the same throughout the entire environment. So whether we're creating accounts in the back end of a model, whether we're creating and editing our chart of our general ledger, whether we're adding in new products to our SKU list, adding in a new cost center to a location, those are all different areas of the modeling backend, but they all work the exact same way. So we can do that through, like I said, clicking on cash, adding in a new account here. We can also leverage that similar import structure or that automated integration as well, straight on back to your ERP. A lot of options there with the general ledger. Like I said, this is for our balance sheet. So we have our assets, liabilities, and our equities. And then we have our P&L general ledger accounts as well. Another really nice area of the back end is the general ledger. And whenever we kick off an implementation with you guys, we're going to make sure out of the gate we nail the general ledger and we nail the org structure. It's going to set us up for a successful deployment, is making sure we get this right out of the gate. And it's not something that you're always stuck with and set in stone either, right? It's something that we can adjust on the fly as needed, because no organization's general ledger or org hierarchy always stays the same. We're very cognizant of that. Adapt is very cognizant of that as well. You're going to always have that flexibility. All right, a couple other ones we want to hit on here in the modeling backend. So you can see here, we have some rules. We might dive into some of those in some future episodes as well, but whenever you want to do some overhead allocations across your organization, maybe Matt has $100,000 of IT expense and we want to break that IT expense out across every single department by headcount. We can go ahead and set up logic for that in allocation rules, or similarly with maybe you have some intercompany receivables and payables and you want to set up some of that and some of the elimination rules back in to help with consolidation work. We have options to help you there too as well. Next one we want to hit on is our level assign sheet. Last episode, we talked a lot about our 3 sheet types, right? We have our standard, we have our cube, we have our models. Inside of this back end, right, is where we have our financial statements, our revenue schedules, and our expense supporting schedules. Coming into the level assigned sheets in the back end, it's where we actually go about making edits to that. Maybe I'm sitting in and I know I need to have more detail in my workforce planning sheet. I can click on my workforce planning sheet. I can go on into the columns and levels if I know it's a modeled sheet. And maybe I want to go ahead and I also want to add in project to my workforce planning model, right? And we want to allocate employees out by projects. I can go into my dimension list, drag and drop project. And now if I save this change, we're going to be able to go ahead and allocate our employees out across the different projects inside the organization. So from modeling, we can quickly and easily go into all of our different, supporting schedules and then edit them or make changes and import data, whatever it may be, pretty quickly, right? All drag and drop, all clicking around like we've been talking about. What's really nice too is in this modeling engine and wherever we go and whenever we're clicking inside of our modeling backend, if we click this question mark, it's going to give us help for exactly what area of the modeling backend we're working in. We're in the back end of a model sheet. We click that, we're getting modeling help. If we were in the levels and I click that question mark, we're getting level help, right? Adaptive was built by a CFO, supposed to be owned and maintained by the finance team in the long run. That's working inside of our sheets backend. Now, we're going to have for sure in-depth conversations on the predictive forecaster and anomaly detection. This is some AI and machine learning algorithm that Adaptive is rolling out and has rolled out to a lot of its customers. Something we're really excited on, and a future episode is definitely worth focusing directly on it. But this is where we can leverage some of that machine learning functionality, as well as the planning center. Maybe you want stats on what are our most commonly interacted reports? What are our most commonly interacted models? How many dimensions do we even have inside of our instance? How many data intersections do we plan by, right? It's where you can go find all those stats. Last one here, and I mean, we work with a lot of large companies, right, that have to facilitate different types of exchange rates and make sure that they can plan by local currency and then roll it on up to total company consolidated currency, whatever that may be. To go ahead and facilitate that and ensure that we have an appropriate currency translation, we can go ahead and click on into our exchange rate table in the back end. And this is going to open up our currency exchange rate table. You can see here, we've got a lot of different options here, right? We have the Australian dollar to the New Zealand dollar, CAD to USD, Euro to USD. If I keep scrolling, right, we've got a lot of different options here. This is going to go ahead and be completely configurable and customizable based on whatever exchange rate relationships y'all need. And what's nice is we can have multiple rate types. So we can have an end of month, we can have an average, we can go ahead and do scenario analysis here as well, right? Maybe if I'm working inside of my FX analysis versions and I want to go ahead and have different rates version over version, we can do that as well to say, you know, Matt's our UK leader and he, you know, just had a great month and we need to go ahead and see what the UK P&L looks like if, the pound moves 5% against the dollar in the next month and a half, right? We can go ahead and do all types of work there. And much like everything else we've looked at today, right? It's all clicking, it's all drag and drop, something that you guys can either integrate in from an ERP, manually import it in through the import template, or work directly in the front end of that aspect of the modeling engine, much like everything else we've clicked to today. It's really nice to have a consistent approach across any updates that need to be made inside of Adaptive, which is going to allow you all, whenever you're going through implementation and owning the system as a power user, you're going to be able to scale and pick up a lot of quick skills and quick wins inside of your Adaptive instance in the long run. And this model management tool is going to be able to allow you to do so. So, Matt, that was kind of a quick overview of a lot of the key pieces of the Adaptive modeling engine that, you know, our customers, whoever their power users are, their Adaptive instance, they're all listening and watching, knowing I know this like the back of my hand. Matt and I obviously do. And whenever we onboard new customers, this is something we emphasize to them is that you're going to understand this part of the system really well once you guys own and adopt Adaptive.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of great points there at the end too, Bo. Scalability, ownership. This is a really brief introduction to model management. As Bo mentioned, the more ownership that you take, the more times that you get to go into model management, the more comfortable you become with that part of the tool, the more familiar you become with that part of the tool. We're going to spend episodes in the future going into each one of those in more detail. I know we've spent time talking about levels because that is really the foundational element that everything is built on top of is the level structure. We talked about versions before, but we're going to get more in depth about how to spin up those versions. We'll get into creating sheets. We'll get into creating allocations like Bo mentioned. but this is really meant to be an introduction to model management. How do I continue to own my instance? Now, I know at the beginning of the episode that we had here today, Beau, I mentioned that, it's really meant to be a self-service tool, and that's completely true. Over the
Hmm.
course of an implementation with Active Cyber, we absolutely do provide administrative training, ins and outs of model management. That's something that we absolutely want to do. But as you can see, completely self-service, everything's available for you. Click of a button. We are here to help guide you through how to click those buttons, how to best make your instance operate for you. So, Beau, any final thoughts?
No, I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it. Like Matt said, right? Easy to use in the long run, and we're here to make sure you guys leverage it to its fullest capability.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate the time, appreciate the demonstration here for us today, Beau, and
Of
you'll see
course.
us again next week. You guys can plan on it.